We're going to call the meeting to order, and that means we're ringing the bell. We're going to welcome everyone to this Remotary meeting. It's Remotary episode 9 for those of you scoring at home. Upcoming events. These are our schedule of meetings for the next well, until you kick me to the curb. So next week we have Mark Young from the Chamber. He's going to talk about economic development in Jonesboro. The week after will be Tony Thomas, Rotary's own Tony Thomas, with CRDC and the new homelessness venture that they're undertaking with the Hub. And that's really interesting and going to be good for our community. The 16th is Dr. Spites coming back to visit with us and provide us a COVID update. And the 23rd, Kevin Inmode from City Water and Light will be with us, and he's going to be talking about what's new in Jonesboro and what's new in the power world. And you probably have heard that City Water and Light is venturing into solar, which is really exciting. And if maybe we can get him to talk a little bit and brag just a little bit, although it is not in their nature to do so, of why and how Jonesboro, Arkansas has some of the lowest utility rates in the country. So there you go. And then after that, on the 27th is our district virtual conference. That's on a Saturday. And then the following Tuesday is where we bid adieu. It's our annual meeting and passing of the gavel. And as of right now, it's most likely going to be online. So there you go. Our program today, I am really excited to tell you that we have Danny Honnoll with us today, and Danny is the president of the Craighead County Historical Society. And I asked Danny if he would kind of continue our Memorial Day observance, and you probably heard that the celebration downtown was canceled, and we weren't able to do a lot of things that to honor our veterans like we should and like they deserve. So we asked Danny to come on and talk to us a little bit about the Doughboy statue that you probably don't think a lot about. You just pass it every day and you think, huh, well, that's cool. And then other things as well, and other local commitments or local links to Memorial Day. So Danny, it's all yours.
I want to welcome y'all to meeting continuing the Memorial Day celebration that we normally have at Jonesboro in Craighead County. It's a very important thing that we remember our veterans of past years. And the Doughboy statue has become a focal issue and more or less the icon for Jonesboro and Craighead County, because since we upgraded the monument area, it's got 5,500 bricks honoring present and past veterans through the years. And you just have to have ties to Craighead County to have a brick, just like if you have a brother that lives in Chicago that you want to give him a brick, that's close enough tie to honor a veteran at our courthouse. Of course, I'm Danny Honnoll. I'm president of the Historical Society. I'm a member for quite a few years. I'm a life member. And these are my revolutionary ancestors. Veterans are very important to my history and to my past. These are the names are the list of my revolutionary soldiers, and the pictures is 2 of my Civil War soldiers that happen to be Confederate. This is my father and my grandfather. My father was a World War II veteran, a Marine during the war, and I've done research on him, and I found out that he was on a troop train going from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, to Camp Pendleton, San Diego, when the bomb was dropped, or he probably would have been in the invasion of Japan. The other one was Willie Wiseman Honnoll, or William Wiseman Honnoll, who I'm named for, and he was in the cavalry during the World War I. I do Civil War reenacting, and I do Santa Claus at time. And this picture of me, I'm with an autistic boy that we could not get set still for a picture, and so he got up there, and I told him I was going to kiss him on the cheek, and next thing I knew, we was lip locked, and I mean that was a quarter of a second, and the photographer got it, and it just went viral on everything. That's one of my favorite pictures doing that. And you say, well, why do you do this? Well, I do this for children, and I do it for my grandchildren. It's a proven fact. If you do not know your great-grandfather, your great-grandchildren will not remember you. If you do not pass your heritage to future generations, your heritage will end with you. This boy is 18 years old and this girl is 16 years old, and this was at a Veterans Day parade in downtown Jonesboro that I participate in every year. And I try to include my grandchildren and take them to cemeteries and stuff, and where they know their ancestors. So it's very important. Lord Macaulay said that, you know, just like what I stated, if you do not know your ancestors, your descendants will not know you. Now this statue originally, you know, of course, when this courthouse was built, that statue was already there. The preceding courthouse was a tall 2-story building with a clock tower when this monument was dedicated. And right behind it, about where that bench is sitting, there was a band gazebo, bandstand, and it sat there for years. And of course, the courthouse, most of us remember Court Square and all the buildings around it, the different businesses, and it's a shame that we couldn't keep our downtown, but we know sometimes progress is more important than preserving history. Not, but we've done a good job of building parking lots in downtown Jonesboro. This monument was dedicated in 2001, just after 9/11. This is the man that was the sculptor of this, John Paulding. He's from Chicago, and he developed this statue that's called Over the Top, and it's got the significant image of a doughboy going out of the trenches over the top of with his fist clenched, going forward. And the ironic thing, most of y'all know where Paragould is, and their Statue of Liberty that they have at Paragould was sculpted by this same individual, and it was dedicated in 1924, and ours was dedicated May 1st of 1920. So just over 100 years ago, there was a big event downtown with bands, speeches, parades, people from all over Northeast Arkansas to dedicate this statue. Now, this is a more recent rendition of it. As far as we know, it's one of the first in the country, and we're pretty sure the first one in the South to be dedicated. And it was a guy by the name of Robert Morris of Memphis is the one that helped construct the base and placement. The statue itself cost about $6,000. The base cost about $1,600. So it cost about $10,000 to erect this fine monument. There's about 34 of these statues, just like this one. Some of them's got a little bit of modification. Some of them got a little bit of barbed wire around the bottom of it. But 34 have been placed in our country. And like I said, this is the focal point of our city. Now, these are the names of the individuals that got killed during World War I. 1,385 Craighead County citizens fought from Craighead County. Now, these are the names of the individuals that died. Now, there's stories with each one of these. One of the guys, Guy Spann, I almost pointed at the screen where you could see where his name is, but I don't guess I can do that. But Guy Spann, he worked at City Water and Light, and he was an engineer. He did not die in battle, but he died of disease. Now, it's very important to know that during that time, 1917, 18, 19, and 20, there was a Spanish flu sweeping the world. And there was about a quarter of the veterans that died during the war that died of diseases in camp. About a third of them never made it to the front, but between accidents and disease. Another name on there, his name is Earl Shaw. He's the only African-American name listed on the monument. It's on the southeast corner of the monument. And he worked at the Hotel Noble. And another name that is significant is George Pickett. Most of you know the Pickett Post of our American Legion, number 21. They was created in 1919, and they're the thrust that helped get the push to get this statue dedicated. Another name is Roman, John Roman, John L. Roman. He was already a hardened veteran in the Army before the outbreak of World War I, but his name is on that stone. His wife laid flowers at the monument the day of the dedication, and I did research, and he was a sergeant in a regiment in France, and there was a machine gun pillbox that was pouring down on his comrades, and so he was picked to go forward. Well, he ended up getting shot in the lower back, and it's pierced his kidney. And they took him back to a field unit, and so they kept working on him, but every time he'd take a drink of water, he would spit up blood, and he was trying to figure out what's going on. Well, eventually a shell was projected up, and it was landed all around him, and the Germans was notorious for killing the prisoners and stuff, and Roman did not like the Germans because of that, and he ended up losing his 27th, 1918. Now, this is the original statue. This picture was made about 1920, and I've got the rifle circle. The big controversy is our statue supposed to have a bayonet on the rifle? Yes, it is. If you look real close, there's a bayonet on that rifle. Well, the controversy is some of the young folks around here would borrow the statue from time to time, and then they would put it back up. Well, then someone would steal it, and then they would put it back up. Well, then one time someone thought it went up in the soldier's hand, so they welded it to his hand, and which then they found out, well, it's not supposed to go in his hand, but here's one of the original pictures, and it's on the bayonet. So we've got a bayonet to go on there, and so we finally decided, rather than putting a bayonet up there, and if you go up there and look at the rifle, it is tipped down on the end. You can tell someone has been it trying to steal the bayonet. So the statue is estimated about $250,000 worth today. So we decided, rather than damaging a $250,000 statue, we would be one of the statues that just doesn't have a bayonet. And it's a shame to say. Now, see, you can see the gazebo, the band box behind the statue in front of the old courthouse of our statue. Money was raised for this statue by, they decided to raise it, and they put penny boxes all around town at the different places for you to donate pennies, nickels, dimes, and that's what this statue was paid for. It wasn't with government money. It was with money from children and widows and the families of these veterans of World War I. Now, here's some soldiers that's got masks on, just like I never thought that we'd see this again in our country. And the thing that history will teach us, this went on from 17 through 1920. So we probably can expect this for a few years unless we can come up with a cure. Now, the bottom left or the bottom right-hand corner of the picture there is the German soldiers with their gas mask on. They had what they call a sneezing bomb or blue shell that would land. Well, it was not toxic enough to kill you. It was not like the mustard gas that would burn you, but it would make you start sneezing. Well, if you're sneezing, you can't concentrate on firing your weapon and stuff. So they would fire the sneezing weapon, and if the guys couldn't get on their mask soon enough or on their mules and such, then as soon as the mist would go away and our soldiers would still be coughing and sneezing, they would attack. So that was a very potent weapon that they used during World War I. Most of us guys, we registered for the draft during Vietnam and different times. Now, this is my grandfather's World War I draft card and his World War II draft card that he had to re-up for. That's a picture of him on horseback. He was actually in the cavalry during World War I. It's got his height. It's got where he was born. It said he had ruddy complexion like myself, light hair, blue eyes like myself. And it also said what his occupation was, that he was married and had one child. So got his signature down in the right-hand corner there, Willie W. Honnoll. Now, the thing about those soldiers back then, if they, back then, they would draw a number out, and you had a specific number. You can go forward, Brian. And they would post it on the front page of the Jonesboro Sun that you was drafted. So everybody in the town and the county knew that you was fixing to go off in the service and everything. So, and my dad, he always talked about when he was growing up that they talked about the individuals that did not go into service. Now, this picture, it's got underneath the U in courthouse, or no, underneath the S, that's my grandfather. He was in front of that old courthouse, lined up with the other individuals fixing to go into service, and that's the front page of the Jonesboro Sun, 1917, stating that these men was drafted. The one to the right of it says, these men are going into service. So if you was around town or in the county after that, everybody knew you was a draft dodger and you was looked down very badly on. Go forward. I think his number was 495 or no 497. It's even got his number that he was given during the war. This picture, I think, if you go forward one, Brian. And that's another one of the Jonesboro Sun, and that's his cousin that says it's in yellow down there, James E. Monette. His name was in there on September 15th. All right, now this is him is leaving, and that's him on horseback, and that old horse's name was Old Fiddler. And my grandfather, he got trampled by that horse during the war, and it broke his ribs and stuff. And another thing, back then they wasn't as cautious with the soldiers. When they tested out the gas mask, they actually used some pretty toxic stuff. My grandfather's gas mask failed, and he had emphysema the rest of his life because of his condition, and he died in 1968 at the age of 72. He lived down in Nettleton. He was a timberman by trade, but you can see the other names like a John McDaniel and Ed Crossman, Frank Goodwin, Claude Hubbard. Now, this is the long statue that a lot of you see. That's the individuals. And to the right, Dr. Ludlow's on there, and A.P. Patton, a lawyer that was on the draft board. But that's what they look like. And I've got that picture there is in the American Legion post over at Monette. Most of these guys, or a lot of those guys, are from over at Monette. And I went over there one day and saw this picture, took a picture of my grandfather's in the middle of the top picture there. Took it to my dad. I said, do you know this guy? He said, that's my dad. That's the youngest picture I ever saw of my dad. And he had never seen this picture. And so but he looked enough like my dad that I thought it would be my grandfather. And he's about the right height. He was about 5'8". You can tell there's some tall guys there. But I've got one of those pictures in my office here, but it's a different one, a different time. But I always like looking at the faces of these guys. Now, when them guys stood there, they would do a left face. They were swore in and marched down to the train depot, which the Union Station was down by what we remember the coffee cup and everything. And so that went on about every 2 weeks. There was a group of guys that marched off. Now, this is George Pickett. He was the first casualty from Craighead County. His monument is out at Oaklawn Cemetery. And that's the American Legion has a circle of their honored veterans, and that's a picture of young George Pickett of Jonesboro, Arkansas, and he attended Jonesboro. There was quite a few African Americans that was in the draft in World War I, and they went off into service, and they've got their tombstones out at the Knights of Pythias Cemetery. And you go out there, there's about 10 of them that's got World War I tombstones. This is Herman Davis from Manila, and you say, well, that's not Craighead County or Jonesboro. Well, this was the Sergeant Alvin York of Arkansas. He killed a lot of Germans and took a couple of machine pillboxes. The guy sitting in that chair looking so dapper, that is a guy by the name of Douglas MacArthur. That statue was made in Italy. And Douglas MacArthur was a colonel, and he escorted that statue to Manila, Arkansas to make sure it was delivered. So there's Douglas MacArthur, born in Little Rock, Arkansas, winner of recipient. I don't like to use the word winner because it's not like a raffle. He was a recipient of the Medal of Honor. His father's the only father-son to win the Medal of Honor for this country. All right, now this is Dan Kafka. You know where Dan Avenue is. It's named for Dan Kafka. And you remember the restaurant, Grandpa's restaurant over on G Street. There's a lot of Kafkas around Jonesboro, Harold Kafka. And you say, well, why are you showing this man? This man is the last person to fire an artillery shell in World War I. And the mechanism is in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. with his name, saying that at 10:58, he fired the round from a railway gauge cannon, and it was the last shot. It's got his name and everything. So our claim to fame from World War I is George Pickett and Dan Kafka. I just thought that was unusual, and you can go on the internet, you can Google it, and so it comes up. So that has to be real. If you Google it, it comes up. Now, one of my favorites is Blackjack Pershing. I've got a penny bank that's about 12 inches tall of a likeness of Blackjack Pershing. I always liked Blackjack Pershing, but the shame of it, you ask your children and grandchildren who this man is, they won't be able to tell you who he is. Our schools are letting us down. They are not teaching history to our kids. They're teaching social studies. They're teaching feel-good history. There's nothing feel-good about history. If you do not teach the true history, we're doomed to repeat it. And Blackjack Pershing was from Missouri, and there was just something about Blackjack. Now this picture here, you say, well, why are you showing this picture? All right, these are three individuals. They're in the National Guard after World War I, and the one on the right, that is General Vaughn. The one in the middle is a guy by the name of John Snyder, Secretary of Treasury of Jonesboro, Arkansas. The guy to the left is a guy named Harry S. Truman. They were best of friends. That's Harry Truman's card booklet he used when he was in France. But Truman and Vaughn were best friends from then on. And the thing about Truman, when he'd go marching the parade, he'd take Snyder. Snyder always wanted him to have a car. He wanted to ride in a car, and he didn't want to march. So he was more of a bookkeeper and stuff. And he ended up being Secretary of Treasury. I've got a $1 bill signed by John Snyder of Jonesboro, Arkansas, and good friend to Harry Truman. Now, all these veterans, they're long gone from World War I. The last World War I veteran probably died 6 years ago. Most of us remember them. Our World War II veterans are going fast. You know, they're dying at a rate about 1,500 to 2,000 a day, and there's no end to it. Or yeah, there's an end to it. It's coming. Now, the thing that's ironic, I have hosted Memorial Day at Jonesboro for all these years. 4 years ago when we did it, there wasn't a World War II veteran there. And I told people, I said, stop and look around. This is history. For us not to have a World War II veteran attend our Memorial Day service is a point that needs to be noted. Now, after that, we've had 5 to 10 at every one of them. Of course, we didn't have one this year, but you around, it's amazing how many years ago there, and I would look out there, and I would see Lee Hummelstein, and I would see the various ones that was veterans of World War II, but they're going way too fast. You know, death, we can't outrun death. None of us can. It's coming for all of us. These veterans met it, defending our freedom, that we can have this meeting like we're having today. And if you ever get a chance to go to Arlington, it's an awesome place to visit. It is just a solemn place to visit and reflect on the veterans of all the wars. Now, these are different books. If you like histories of Craighead County, one is written by Harry Lee Williams. It's the kind of the square one on the left that's got the gold writing, and then Goodspeed is propped up next to it. The gold book is Charles Stuck book, written in 1959 at the Centennial. The Jonesboro said the upper. Now, the bottom one is the book that I wrote about veterans of Craighead County. I wrote it about 10 years ago. I had the pleasure of doing it, and there's a lot of good veterans stories in there, and we didn't get every one of them, but I got as many as I can. All right, now, some of y'all are members of the Historical Society, and some of you are not. Now, this says 2019 on it, but you can print that off, and for $20, you get 4 quarterlies a year. We have meetings quarterly. We didn't have one last time, and we may not have one this time because of the age of our members and stuff, and we usually have it at the First Baptist Church. But if you would like to help continue to preserve the history of Craighead County and get involved, there's different levels that you can join. Participate. If you don't want to join, we do take donations and use it for the furtherment of the keeping of the history of Craighead County. All gave some gave all. That's a very poignant statement, and I don't know who said it, but it's very, very prophetic, and that is very true, because I had a friend that got killed during the Vietnam War, and I try to remember him as much as I can. His name is David King. He's buried out in Pine Log Cemetery. Now, if you'd like to buy a brick, all you got to do is go on the internet and put craigheadveterans.org, and it will bring up this site.
Here's the information on buying a brick from the Craighead County Veterans Monument Foundation. I can get these things printed in the bulletin, so you can take advantage of. Danny's back?
Well,
no? Okay, maybe not.
All right, I'm unmuted. I was at the end, and you can sell my bricks, and I'll get off here. And I appreciate y'all's time. I enjoyed talking.
Danny, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for your service to the county and to our history and keeping it alive. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, folks, next week at Remotary episode 10, it will be Mark Young's turn to tell us some of the things that are going on in Jonesboro, economic development wise. Things don't just shut down because we can't have meetings face to face. So there you go. We're going to do this again, and didn't know Danny was going to talk about Harry Truman, but here's our thought for the day. Our debt to the heroic men and valiant women in the service of our country can never be repaid. They've earned our undying gratitude. America will never forget their sacrifices, and especially as we saw in the chat box over here, Sharice Jones Branch and her family, all veterans, and thank you all for your service, and all the Rotarians that have served. We appreciate you. Rotary Club of Jonesboro, it is now time that we ring the bell one more time. Until we meet again, continue to rotate. Thank you.